Good day, everyone. We are Group 3 of LCLS1 Y12, and you're listening to our podcast, Mental Health in the Lasallian Community. My name is Andrea Tabaniag, and with me today are my groupmates. Please introduce yourselves and tell us what mental health is to you.
Hi, I'm Jillian Villena. And from my understanding, mental health is not the absence of stress, but it is one's ability to cope with unideal situations.
Hi, my name is Claire Lumanlan, and for me, mental health is a very serious issue that we must tackle, and we should really think of the misconceptions and try to replace this old thinking and be more considerate because mental health is very, very important.
Hello, I am Gregory Tiong, and mental health to me is mainly understanding yourself, since we were all raised in different environments and have different reactions and responses to certain things or events in our lives.
Hello, so my name is Gwyneth Jao, and for me, mental health is a state of mental well being that enables people to cope with the stresses of life.
Hi, my name is Joshua Octa, and for me, mental health is one's ability to acknowledge what they feel and their ability to cope with the challenges thrown at them.
Hi, I'm Pons, and mental health for me is the state of our emotional well being that encompasses our feelings, how we think, and how we behave in situations.
So I'm Sidney Ting, and I believe that mental health is actually one of the most common illnesses, and although it's actually not as easily identifiable as physical illnesses, I believe that it's still something equally important and needs an equal amount of attention, especially for those experiencing them.
And again, I'm Andrea Tabanyag, and for me, mental health is something that we all kind of have a hard time understanding at first, but we have to be able to break that stigma and talk about it more with the people around us. Now, for a general definition of mental health has intrinsic and instrumental value and is integral to our well being. And mental health is determined by a complex interplay of individual, social, and structural stresses and vulnerabilities. And as I said earlier, usually we have difficulty understanding and dealing with our mental health and the concerns that come with it. Which leads me to my first question for the group. When experiencing mental health concerns, what Lasallian virtues did you use in addressing them? And we can start off with Gregory.
Generally for me, silence is the one that I apply the most. Yes, it is important to talk to other people about concerns and issues you're having, but by choosing to reflect and understand your concerns by yourself or with God before involving others is the most important thing for me, since you and God will be the only people who will always be there for yourself 100% of the time.
Well, for me, I think faith is the Lasallian virtue that I use to address mental health. It's because sometimes we really just need to believe in God and trust His will that we'll get through this, even if we're experiencing so much stresses in life. How about you, Joshua?
Well, for me, it was prudence. When we fall into a deeply saddened state, we tend to do self-destructive things or push people we love away. Uh, and when we're in states like this, intrusive thoughts become louder and harder to ignore. And not that I've ever been that sad, but I have definitely felt those urges before. But prudence have helped guide me to seek only positive improvement rather than succumb to harmful habits. It it helps us focus on getting better and avoid doing things we might regret later or actions that might negatively affect those that we love. I'd like to hear Ponce's answer for this question.
So to help me cope up whenever I feel stress or anxiety, the silent virtue that helps me adjust this is mainly gravity. I try to stay quiet and be a bit distant to the people around me because I know I might say something or say something that I don't really intend to say. So whenever I do talk to them, I tend to be more reserved with the things I say, though that I may avoid something hard. So that I may avoid saying something harsh or something I don't really mean so that I could protect their emotions. So Next, I think Sydney would like to say something.
Yes, I do have something to say. And I actually, despite having not experienced any serious mental health issues, I think that gentleness, for one, is also a very important Lasallian virtue when addressing these mental health issues. So, actually, similar to what Pons said about being careful of what you say and also possibly saying things that you don't mean, I think that gentleness in this case is also very relevant because it requires an amount of tenderness and sensitivity from people experiencing these, or of course, for people helping those experiencing them, so that you can be open-minded to, if you're experiencing them, then your own inner feelings, and for you helping someone else, then of course the feelings of others, what they're experiencing, and of course, being tender and sensitive to how other people act allows you to be more open, and it increases the amount of self-reflection that you experience so that you can address such problem. So yes.
All right. For me, I think that the Lasallian virtue that's strongest is reserve because I'm a very emotional person. And so when I struggle with mental health or I'm experiencing stress or just anything in general, it's easy for me to have like emotional outbursts. And that's really not good because I could say something that I don't mean, um like what you guys have been talking about. And so it's a good thing to have reserve because it's a reminder to kind of control your emotions and keep them in check. And it would keep you, it could keep everyone, if everyone has reserve, would keep everyone from saying things that they do not mean, which I believe is what, St. John Baptist would want for us and what also God would want for us. So yeah, what about you, Chloe?
Thanks for sharing that, you guys. This is quite difficult for me to talk about, but yeah, since this is our podcast, for me, I have used the virtue of zeal in managing depression. I dealt with this mental health concern after my dad passed away. Depression is a tricky thing because it lies to you. It takes away your joy and purpose in life, or at least it manipulates you into believing so. So it is really difficult because it's not, depression is not only mental, but it affects your physical health as well because it makes you want to stop doing literally anything in life, such as I had difficulty sleeping when I had depression. Like I literally couldn't, and it was really hard because like I couldn't sleep, but at the same time I didn't have the energy to be awake either. Yeah, it was really difficult. So I read in the dictionary that zeal is energy, but in Lasallian studies we learned that it's actually more. It is not just about energy, but it's about pursuing your destiny and God's plan for you. So for me, I see zeal as the ability to push through and forward in life, no matter what difficulty you may face.
Okay, for me, for the Lasallian virtue, I think patience really applies to me because having a mental health condition can be really challenging. But if we practice patience as well as having faith in God, we can really overcome and be able to move on with life. So, like, based on my experience, back then I took like an LOA, a leave of absence. And I guess if I wasn't patient enough, I wouldn't be back in LaSalle. So yeah, I think like what Chloe said, depression is a very difficult thing to understand. But since people are more open to talking about it these days, I think it's patience is really a very important virtue, not only for Lasallians but for everyone to have.
All right. Thank you, Claire, and thank you everyone for answering. I think everyone's answers were very unique and they really do show how different Lasallian virtues can be applied when addressing mental health concerns. But I actually have a follow-up question which anyone can answer, which is in times of mental health crisis or issues or just problems in general, how do you think your Lasallian virtues are strengthened?
Actually think that's a good question. So for me, I actually believe that mental health illnesses are very complicated. When someone is experiencing these issues or is helping anyone with them, I think that, of course, it requires a good amount of care, open-mindedness, and self-reflection, since this is a very sensitive issue whose effects some might have difficulty grasping. For religious people, I think, though, that it requires serious and strong communication and discernment with God, and of course, reflection of the Spirit. And of course, together with addressing mental health issues, I think naturally as well come the aforementioned Lasallian virtues. Some of these virtues, such as gentleness, prudence, generosity, among others, I think induce self growth that would actually be needed in overcoming this stage of life. So, which is why I think, yes, that to this extent, Lasallian virtues are indeed strengthened in times of mental health crisis.
Oh, I'd also like to answer this question. So, in times of mental health crisis, I believe that the virtue of faith can take on multiple dimensions. It can be, one individual's personal faith, or it could be their own ability to overcome their challenges, or faith in having a support system around them. For those with religious beliefs like us, turning to their faith and spirituality can offer them comfort and hope during difficult times. In a mental health crisis, the virtue of zeal can also be strengthened by channeling it into seeking help and treatment, making us determined to improve one's well being and supporting others who are going through similar challenges.
Thank you, Sydney and Joshua, for your answers. I think they really contributed to the discussion. And yeah, now moving on to our next question, which is how can we relate this theme of mental health to the experience of St. John Baptist de La Salle? And we can start off with Sydney.
From what we've learned in class LCLS1, we learned that St. John Baptist de La Salle experienced a lot of challenges. Of course, none of these were easy, and a lot of these setbacks probably discouraged St. John Baptist de La Salle in doing what he was doing, or made him doubt what he was doing is correct. For example, if he was founding his institutions together, of course, he felt some betrayals from his brothers. On the other hand, sometimes there are external factors that couldn't be controlled, or at least were difficult to control. And I think that similar to this, even mental health issues are difficult to control. They're difficult to grasp. We don't know what they mean to us or how to go about them. We just know that they're there. And of course, in handling this theme, as previously stated, we probably need a good amount of self-reflection, open-mindedness if you experience them, or helping someone who is experiencing them. And similar to how St. John Baptist de La Salle handled them, he required a good communication with God, discernment. Of course, a lot of times he probably had some doubt, had to like when the time when he took a break from the work that he was during, he had to go around the country a lot. Those were very difficult. And so I think mental health issues, this theme also is something that requires a lot of care and understanding before we begin tackling.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. On my end, I think that, as you said, St. John Baptist de La Salle encountered a lot of issues in creating his institutions. His life wasn't the easiest. He really had to go through a lot. And so I think that's something that we can all relate to. It's there are a lot of different challenges that we face. Like every person has their own set of problems, and it's unique. And it also depends on how we face those problems. And so I think mental health really plays a big role in like us dealing with our problems. And St. John Baptist de La Salle is a very good example of this, because he stayed strong and he stayed determined. And even though it was probably really difficult for his mental health, he still pushed through. He still stayed strong in his faith as well. And so, yeah, that's how I would relate it to St. John Baptist de La Salle. I think that we could use him as our inspiration in keeping our mental health in check and keeping that as a number one priority in our lives. What about you, Claire?
Okay, for me, I'd like to relate this with a virtue I mentioned earlier, which is patience. So, like, it took St. John Baptist de La Salle a really long time to establish the institution de La Salle brothers. But because of his patience and his faith in God's plan, he was able to build the De La Salle schools. So, through these schools, he was able to teach the youth to trust God's plan and even spread the the good word. And like, no matter how long it took for him to build the schools, it just really shows how, like what was mentioned, his strength in his goal. And despite having probably like mental health issues of his own, he was able to use this to his advantage. And now we have the LaSalle University, and that is one thing that we can be proud of as Lasallians. So what about you, Chloe?
So for me, to answer this question, relating it to the theme, well, the parents of Saint LaSalle passed away, just like how my dad passed away. I think that grief is difficult because it is such a personal issue to deal with. The pain itself never really goes away, but rather we learn how to deal with it. Sorry. To add, just like Saint LaSalle, he dealt with a lot of heartbreak in his life, but still, we cannot let negative situations get the best of us. I believe that everybody has a destiny, and our own destiny is not dependent on others. I think that this is related to my chosen virtue of zeal. As earlier mentioned in question one, I did choose the virtue of zeal, that we have to keep going no matter what. That's how I see it.
For me, I think the experience that I and a lot of people can relate to is when he renounced his position as canon and moved in with teachers and just experienced a new environment. Experiencing a new environment is not easy and can give one stress and anxiety, especially when there is a lack of support from the people around you. But I think that with God, we can accomplish anything.
I actually agree with Gregory. Pretty sure that the lack of support he got from his peers and loved ones affected his mental health in some way, but through his perseverance, he was still able to achieve his goal. And also, um, it's also through God. That's why he was able to achieve his goal.
For me, so I kind of have like a similar case with Chloe. I unfortunately also lost my dad a few years ago, like a few years into the pandemic. So in a similar way, I also looked up to how St. John Baptist de La Salle managed to rise and reach his goals. Uh, Despite facing difficulties, De La Salle continued to pursue his work and remained committed to his mission. I believe that the resilience he exhibited during these moments and the coping mechanism that he used can serve as an example of how we and other individuals facing mental health issues can find strength and perseverance to overcome such challenges. St. John de La Salle also had a huge emphasis on the importance of support and community. Similarly, a strong support system is essential for individuals dealing with mental health issues. For me, it was my friends that helped me get through that rough patch in my life. I believe finding understanding and surrounding yourselves with caring people can make a huge difference in your recovery journey. What do you think, Pons?
To add to lang to what Andrea and Claire said, I think it really does take a lot of courage and hard work to um to overcome challenges. So through his faith and commitment to his mission, his strong relationship with others, he also believed that God was always with him, and he found comfort in prayer and meditation, and found strength in his relationships with his family, friends, and colleagues.
All right. Thank you guys for answering the first three questions so far. Now it's time for our last question, which I think a few of you can answer. It's as Lasallians, how can we create a safe environment of understanding to dismantle stigmas or stereotypes surrounding mental health and encourage open conversations about it? And we can start with Pons.
So as a science, I think we can make a safe environment of understanding stigmas and on mental health by challenging negative stereotypes about mental health. When we hear negative stereotypes, we can explain that mental health conditions are real and treatable, and that people with mental health conditions are not weak, or as how older people would say, um, mental people with mental health are nag-iinarte lang, ganun. So I think we should try to open up more conversations about this, especially towards with older people.
Yeah, for me, I agree with everything Juan said. You should really not, I mean, everyone should not think that having mental health issues, whatever it is, it's a sign of weakness. It's actually the opposite. To be able to move on with life despite having a mental health condition, it just means that you choose to be strong, and asking for help is not a bad thing. So for me, you just have to treat people with kindness because you just never know what someone is going through. And being kind can really make someone's day, even if like they're really already feeling down. If you just treat people with kindness, and I guess that will probably help them to cope with their mental health issues. So what about you, Gregory?
For me, I think the most important thing is we can like see, act, and judge as God would in order to like create a safe environment. And encouraging open conversations and listening to one's concerns and issues is another simple thing that we can do. And just simply being kind to everyone, especially when they're having a bad day. How about you, Gwyneth?
I believe the best way to dismantle stigmas and stereotypes surrounding mental health would be to be open minded about it and welcoming, because there are some people that are too scared to share about what they feel and what they think because of how judgmental people can be in our society today. So I agree with everything everyone said, especially treating people with kindness because we never know what someone is going through.
All right, thank you everyone for answering those questions. Unfortunately, we've reached the end of our podcast, but we hope that to all the people listening, or even to Miss who's listening right now, we hope that we were able to talk about mental health in the Lasallian community effectively, and that we were able to give the message that we really wanted to give. And before we end, I'd just like to remind everyone that mental health is something that we must all take seriously. And we shouldn't like invalidate how we feel or how other people feel, because it's really something deep within us, and we must understand that and accept that. So, here are some emergency hotlines in case you or someone you know is experiencing any mental health issues. You can contact the National Health Center for Mental Health, and they have crisis hotlines for this, and the Philippine Mental Health Association Incorporation. That's all for today's podcast. Thank you for listening. Bye,
Thank
guys.
you.
You.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.